When we think of Africa, most of us picture hunger, thirst, and poverty. Eritrea is one of those countries. Let's take a look at a map. Can you point out where it is? Probably not. I couldn't either until I started working on this video. Right here, north of Ethiopia, lies one of the smallest countries in Africa, in a remarkably strategic location. But this place is unlike any other African country. Take a look at the Press Freedom Index. You probably weren't surprised to see North Korea and other countries at the bottom. But what's this? Eritrea ranks dead last at 180. Imagine a country ruled by a single man for nearly 30 years, with no elections ever held, where all independent media is banned, and internet access is practically non-existent. A society where most of the population is subjected to indefinite mandatory military service and forced labor. A place where leaving the country means risking execution. An open-air prison. Today, we're diving deep into Eritrea's story. With a population of around 3.5 million, Eritrea is small in size but immense in its tragedy. Its history from the Ottomans to Italian colonizers, through bloody wars with neighboring Ethiopia, during the Cold War forms the backdrop of today's closed and oppressive regime. And yes, the Turks were part of it too. In the 16th century, when the Ottoman Empire took control of the Red Sea, it also dominated Eritrea's coast. Imagine that the Ottomans reached that far. In the late 19th century, during the colonial scramble for Africa, Italy set its sights on Eritrea's lands and took its first step by purchasing coastal regions. Yes, you heard that right, they literally bought the country. Back then, borders were drawn with a pen. In 1890, the Italian Eritrea colony was officially established. Italy made Eritrea a part of its East African Empire, and the capital, Asmara, was rapidly modernized during this period. After 50 years of Italian rule, the region fell under British control. Are we surprised? Of course not. When it comes to colonialism, the British are never far behind. Then, in 1950, the United Nations made a decision to unite Eritrea with Ethiopia in a federation. Eritrea was granted autonomous status within Ethiopia. But this arrangement didn't last long. A decade later, the Ethiopian emperor abolished Eritrea's autonomy and annexed the country. For Eritreans, this meant the loss of their right to self-determination. The result? History was written in blood, and an armed struggle for independence began. Eritrean guerrillas waged a grueling resistance in mountainous terrains and desert conditions. After 30 years, they left behind countless bodies and defeated the Ethiopian army, achieving de facto independence. Thus, in 1991, Africa's open prison was born as one of the continent's youngest states. When independence was won, Eritreans were filled with hope. After 30 years of war, they expected peace, freedom, and democracy. All that sacrifice couldn't be for nothing. A transitional government was formed under the leadership of Afwerki. In 1994, the liberation movement became the only legal political party. Plans were made to draft a new constitution and hold elections. But those hopes were quickly dashed, and Eritrea became a battleground against its own authoritarianism. Afwerki, still in power today, is one of Africa's longest-serving leaders. He was once seen as the charismatic commander of the independence war, but from the country's earliest days, he began consolidating power in his own hands. In places like Africa, once someone takes the seat of power, they don't let go. They take paranoid steps to maintain legitimacy and silence opposition. If they fail, they risk being overthrown by a coup. Africa has plenty of examples. Afwerki knew this well, and in 1997, a draft constitution was prepared. It was all a facade. On paper, it promised a multi-party system and basic rights. But that constitution was never implemented. In 2001, after the war ended, some senior officials and intellectuals began raising their voices for reform. Even some of Afwerki's closest comrades, including government officials, published a letter demanding democratic elections. If you're a dictator, you have to be ruthless. If your comrades or closest allies threaten your power, you eliminate them or you're done. Afwerki knew this all too well. That night, security forces swiftly arrested the ministers and commanders who signed the letter. The same night, editors and reporters from the country's few private newspapers were rounded up from their homes. From that day on, not a single independent newspaper was published in Eritrea. Those arrested were never tried and were held in secret cells. More than 20 years later, their fates remain unknown. This process cemented Isaias Afwerki as the absolute ruler. So, what makes Eritrea earn the nickname Africa's North Korea? It's not just about being a dictatorship. For one, free press is completely eradicated in Eritrea. The country has only one state-owned newspaper, one radio station, and one television channel. All broadcasts serve the official ideology. According to 2019 data, yes, it's old because getting data from Eritrea is incredibly hard. Only 1.3% of the population has internet access. Eritreans need police permission just to get a SIM card. Even texting via mobile phones is banned. It sounds like a joke, but if a world war broke out today and was contained before reaching Eritrea, the people there would live through it without even knowing. Criticizing the government or expressing a different opinion, out of the question. But it's not just that. There's no freedom of assembly either. Similarly, certain religious groups face persecution. Small groups like evangelical Christians have their worship declared illegal, and their members are imprisoned. In this country, engaging in any idea or belief not approved by the state is considered an act against the government. Naturally, you can't even pray freely here. If you're thinking, well, why don't they just leave? It's because leaving Eritrea is next to impossible for its citizens. Eritreans under 50 are not granted permission to travel abroad. Those who attempt to cross the border illegally face a shoot-on-sight policy. If you're caught at the border, you could be shot without warning. Let's say you're incredibly lucky and manage to escape undetected. It's still not over. The families of those who flee are imprisoned. State propaganda is everywhere. The regime's official ideology and the theme of external enemies are woven into every aspect of life. The government claims Eritrea is constantly under threat, with foreign powers, especially Ethiopia and the United States, plotting to destroy the country, keeping the population in a state of fear and suspicion. Of course, the sole purpose is to enforce obedience. One of the regime's key pillars is the mandatory military service system, which encompasses nearly all of the country's youth. Introduced in the mid-90s, this system was initially presented as a temporary sacrifice for the defense and reconstruction of the newly independent nation, but it quickly became an indefinite obligation. By law, every Eritrean is called to national service at 18. And I'm not just talking about military service, national service. It's not limited to the army. On paper, it's 18 months, but in reality, it's indefinite. It can last decades. This applies to both men and women. People are used as cheap labor in any sector the state deems necessary. Young people are forced to spend their final year of high school in a military training camp called Sawa. So, the start of civilian life is directly under military discipline. This militarized societal structure has severe social consequences. For one, young people have no life plans. Life equals the state. Dreams of university, career goals, or even marriage and starting a family are incredibly difficult. As a result, the private sector is extremely weak. The country can't develop even if it wants to. Farmers, shopkeepers, or professionals can be suddenly drafted and sent to the front lines or construction camps. In other words, the country has created a cycle of poverty within itself. The army isn't normal either. Human Rights Watch has reported that disciplinary practices in the Eritrean army can amount to torture, and female soldiers, in particular, face sexual violence from commanders. For these reasons, the United Nations has labeled Eritrea's practices as modern slavery. According to reports, nearly 400,000 people have been forced to work for the authoritarian government for years with no way out. In this context, the United Nations imposed sanctions on Eritrea multiple times. However, the last of these sanctions were lifted in 2018 after a peace agreement with Ethiopia. But of course, nothing changed in terms of human rights. In the end, Eritrea's story is one of the most striking and tragic examples in modern African history. A people who fought a decades-long bloody war for independence never tasted its fruits as freedom. The new state, built on a saga of heroism, quickly turned into a structure that enslaved its own people. The Africa's North Korea comparison might seem exaggerated at first glance, but every aspect we've examined confirms its validity. Eritrea is a country isolated from the world, ruled by a single man, where citizens are deprived of basic rights. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please show your support by liking the video and leaving a comment. Take care, friends, and we'll be back soon. Stay well.